Hello, Steven Mirassou with the Steven Kent Winery here on a beautiful afternoon in the Livermore Valley. Despite my unabashed enthusiasm for Cabernet Franc and my constant evocation of the glories of that greatest grape, the Steven Kent Winery brand started with Cabernet Sauvignon. That was the variety that my father and I felt would be the best suited to endure a challenge. We threw our gauntlet down in 1996, 30 years ago, to prove that Livermore Valley was a world-class appellation. We felt that given the history of the valley, given the viticultural excellence of the valley, demonstrated over 150 plus years, that Cabernet Sauvignon could compete with that variety from Sonoma, from Napa, from Paso Robles, wherever it happened to be from. And I think that we proved that over the course of time. Our first vintage was 1996, so 30 vintages ago with the 2025 vintage. The press loved the wine. Our club members and our guests at the taste room loved the wine. And Cabernet Sauvignon is spectacular here in the valley. One of the, I think, key differences between what we do here in Livermore and what the Napa folks do is this appellation is governed by the wind. You can see in the background the trees are moving in the afternoon. This is a small piece of what happens during the actual heart of the harvest. This is an east-west oriented valley that is dominated by wind that comes from San Francisco Bay every afternoon. That wind brings with it fewer fewer photosynthetic hours each day, meaning that you get less ripening effect each day in Livermore compared to Napa Valley, for instance. So we need more days to get the aggregate number of hours that we have to have in order to get physiologically ripe fruit, which means that typically, especially in the eastern foothills of Livermore, where Gilmedi Vineyard happens to be, we need to be harvesting in the middle of November, which is very typical for us, long after Napa Valley is done. What that wind also does, though, is it incrementally advances sugar levels in fruit. So by the time we hit mid-November, we have ripe fruit. Seeds are ripe, skins are ripe, sugar levels are where they need to be, acid levels, pH levels are all where we need them to be to produce world-class Cabernet. And it gets done at an alcohol level that's lower than would be typical for most warm growing areas in California. So that's one of the magic things about Livermore Valley is that it's our little secret weapon that we love. It's warm enough to get Bordeaux varieties ripe, but it's windy enough to make sure that we're doing it at lower sugar levels. We've made a lot of Cabernet over the course of 30 years. Back in 2006, I started experimenting with single clone lots from the vineyards that we use, Gilmedi Vineyard, Home Ranch, Smith Ranch, back in the day. And in 2006, we created what was called the Premier Cabernet Collection. So it was small releases of single clone blocks from single vineyards to accentuate the specificity of a site, to showcase what happens when you take a really beautiful piece of ground and you make beautiful wines from it, or at least attempt to make beautiful wines from it. These wines were big hits early on. It got to be a little untenable after a while, though, because we would have, multiple lots of single clone Cabernet from 4 or 5 different vineyards, and it became a jumble of things rather than a really specific idea about what Cabernet could be from Livermore. And although we continue to do single vineyard wines, and I think they're extremely important in Livermore to showcase how diverse this appellation is, and to showcase how important specific sites are for Livermore, the Premier Cabernet became a study in the best barrels from the harvest. Didn't matter which clone, didn't matter which vineyard. All of the barrels were tasted blind by our winemaking team, me and my wife Beth and my son Aiden. We would taste these barrels blind, sometimes well more than 100 barrels. We would taste blind over the course of a year to determine which 10, 12, 16, 5, whatever the vintage gave us, would be the absolute best barrels for the vintage. And that became the premier Cabernet. This weekend, we'll be releasing our 2022 Premier Cab. And it's rare, but it does happen on occasion. This is a single clone, single vineyard wine. This is Gilmedi Vineyard Clone 30 Cabernet from 2022. 22 is a very warm growing year. It was a year where Labor Day weekend, which typically is the sort of warmest growing part of our harvest, we often get temperatures 100 to 105 over Labor Day weekend. We had about 8 days in a row where we got to 110, 112 degrees. And it took several weeks after that initial big hit of heat for the vines to start actively photosynthesizing again. And 22 gave us a warm, fairly ripe vintage, mitigated by the fact that Gilmedi tends to give us ripe fruit at lower sugar levels. So we had those two opposing realities mediating each other. So we got this beautiful, beautiful, rich, but still acid-driven, lithe Cabernet Sauvignon, which is really exciting. I look at our cab and I don't think of the distended drug-fueled bodies of bodybuilders like I do Napa Valley. I think of gymnasts. I think of that lithe muscularity. I think of wines that have tension and have structure to them, but that aren't so extracted and jammy that you lose all sense of finesse and you lose all sense of varietal characteristics. And if you've been drinking Cabernet Sauvignon from California for the last 20, 30, 40 years, you realize that the Cabernet from California is about herbal quality. It's about olives, and it's about bay and sage at 12.5 to 13% alcohol. That was the style of California Cabernet for 100 years, up until the sort of critic fueled jamminess and rocket fuel that just is uninteresting to me as a winemaker and a wine drinker. The 2022 Premier, I think, is an absolutely gorgeous wine. We only made 125 cases. It's available first to our allocation members at the winery, but there usually is a little bit left over. This is going to be a vintage, I think, highly sought after. And we would love for you to get a chance to try this wine when you come to the winery. 2022 Premier Cabernet, Steven Kent Winery, 100% Gilmedi Vineyard. I think it's delicious. Let me get a little hit at what the bottle looks like. Premier, what it tastes like. It's a beautiful wine. It's a lot of complexity there. There's a lot of actual beauty. Beauty in wine gives me joy, which is one of the things that I'm always searching for. It's in short supply in the world, no matter how good the times happen to be. Thanks for joining me, Steven Kent Mirassou, Steven Kent Winery. Drink something delicious. Cheers.